Hello and welcome to lesson 4 of this course. In this session, we're going to be going through a little bit more around time management and some core fundamental skills that you will need moving forward to run your business and being able to eventually take a step out of it. Remember to continue doing one video per day, taking notes as you go and implementing things immediately. Remember that if you're a business owner or even if you're a manager in another organization, that you are a strategic asset. So you need to stick to the time budget that you're allowed, and you need to stick to a 40-hour work week. Whether or not you do less is up to you. However, I would strongly avoid trying to do more because all you're doing is trading off that pressure, your effort and energy into work, but then you're not putting as much effort and energy into your health, your family, other tasks that have to happen around your house or in your personal life. So by taking on extra work or by doing late nights and weekends and extra hours that you don't need to do, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and you're valuing your own time a little bit less than what it should be. So we're going to talk a little bit more about delegation and being able to get rid of those low dollar tasks, those menial tasks that are either repetitive or that would be cheaper paying somebody else to do it. You should be thinking of yourself as $300, $400, $500 an hour at least. As the business owner, you are the one doing all of the strategic things. You're making the direction, you're setting the goals, you're setting the targets. You're not just doing the everyday. So yes, sometimes you got to take the rubbish out. And that can be a show of force of, yes, I'm not too good to take the rubbish out. It can also mean that kind of needed doing, and instead of getting somebody else to do it, you're doing a little bit of a favor. But there is a limit to that. At some point, you really do need to think of the high level tasks and value your time as the business owner. You could be doing more sales time, which could make you a lot more money than if you were just cleaning something. One of the biggest concepts for time saving is working in blocks of time. There is a concept of manager time versus maker time. So maker time is when you're sitting down focusing on doing the things. So like if you work in a service business in particular, you have to do the task, and doing the task takes a level of concentration. In my line of work, I need to do deep work and I need to do it over a long period of time. It's not something I can jump in and jump out of. It really does take a lot of concentration. However, manager time is when you're organizing things. That's when you're having meetings. That's when you're taking calls. Now, depending on your line of work, an employee really should be focusing on maker time, and a manager should really be focusing on manager time. And by their powers combined, we've now got the division of labor such that we can do a more effective job in our role. Both are important, both are necessary, but ideally you want to stick to your strengths and where you are operating with the most value. So when you're doing tasks, you need to think about not only yourself, but your team. People like to do the tasks that they're either good at or they're interested in. They're going to do it in half the time. They're going to enjoy doing it. And at the end, you're going to find that people are more productive and happy in their work. So what you could look at doing is creating a task list of all the things that need to get done. Then allow time for people to go in and self-select what elements that they want to do of that task. And then whatever's left, because there's always tasks that no one really wants to do, they just get evenly distributed amongst the team. But at least then the people who have selected the right task have volunteered for that particular element, or have said that this is what my strength is, or this is where my interest lies. And so they're more likely to do a better job of it. Also, if you're the manager or the owner, no one's sitting there telling you what tasks to get done. Yes, you can see what needs to be done, and then you can start to assign it. And sometimes it's easier to assign it to other people, but it's not always easy to figure out what you should be doing. When you're looking at your goals and objectives, you should be making tasks that align. Make the list in its entirety of all of the things that you want to do, including the things that perhaps seem a bit of a waste of time or that are a nice to have or something like that. Write them down, get them out of your head. Then look at the entire list and then start to coordinate which tasks you're actually going to complete. Some ideas might be able to be combined. Some might be delayed and others prioritized. And as you go, you know which tasks are going to be of the most value, so you can focus on those ones. You almost need to treat yourself and your thinking like a software company. You have a whole bunch of feature requests that you can never actually deliver on. And you've got a few goals for you and the organization. And then you've got a certain amount of time that you can actually input towards achieving those goals. But you also need to allow some room for bug fixes. You need to be able to allow a little bit of time for things that you didn't expect to come into your workflow. So by doing that, you allow a development backlog, and you're completing tasks in an agile development framework or in an agile fashion. By doing this, you maximize the output. You're constantly releasing new features or, being effective and delivering on your tasks. And you're also hitting the major milestones as you go. So another way to frame this is like what we talked about with the Eisenhower matrix in the last lesson. It's a way to assign tasks in order of importance and urgency. There are lots of task management applications out there, and you can use the one that's most comfortable for you. I'm also a massive fan of personal knowledge management, or knowledge management in general, whether it be for a company or for an individual, because half the time on how do I do this or how do I do that or what should I do in this task or in this process or procedure is much easier to share if it's written down. So whether that is a note that you created, and sometimes you forget things or it's handy to take notes as you go, but when you use certain note-taking tools, you tend to write 3, 4, 5 times more, and you can make better connections in your brain and you don't forget things, those as unknown knowns, which is where you knew it and then you forgot it. So you've already gone to the effort of collecting this information and now you can't access it because you've forgotten it, you've buried the file somewhere, you've lost the email, whatever it is. But task management and then communication are the two most important factors for being able to scale up your time, because there's no sense going back to or having to rewrite things or having to explain something all over again when you could just simply send a link to a video or send a link to an article. And to rapidly create documentation, I like to use a dictation tool where I talk for 3 to 5 minutes to the application. It gives me a couple of paragraphs of text. I then run that through grammar and the formatting sorted, and there's my knowledge article. Getting back to manager time versus make time, it's really about block time. So get your calendar, and I recommend that you use your calendar in a very controlled way, because now you can block out certain times. For example, I block out every Thursday for content creation. No meetings, no calls. I just lock down and do this. Once you build the discipline of the calendar and you stick to it, instead of getting busy with all these little things that pop up, you can block out half a day to get that one major exercise out of the way. And you know what? If you don't feel like it because you're a bit tired or whatever, you can move it to the next day or the next week. But by managing that time out, you can then move things into schedules, and that's when you can start to tackle the really big things in your business instead of just dealing with lots of small, immediate micro fires that don't even really matter at the end of the day. You also need the self-discipline to put a limit on things and say, well, I didn't get to this right now. I'm going to do it in the morning. So that way you can go and have your afternoon or your weekend and actually recharge and refresh, because when you're not at your full energy the next day, you're half as productive as you would have been had you just left it alone, gone home, had a sleep and got back to it the next day, fresh and recharged. Over the last few years, there has been a strong hustle and grind culture in business. And then there's also the other side where it's all about lifestyle businesses, but there's a happy zone in the middle where you're not burning yourself so hard, and yet you're not trying to have this lustrous lifestyle with 0-hour work week or whatever it is. Somewhere in the middle is both fulfilling, engaging, entertaining, and you can get a serious amount of work done in that time. I know I've done the wrong thing here. I've gone and put in crazy hours. I've been up early, late nights, been working really hard, or even not sleeping properly for whatever reason because something's in my mind. I have a rule. I don't look at any emails, notes, texts, or anything after a certain time of night, because I don't want to look at that one email that then stresses me out and I have a really bad sleep. I'm much more effective when I'm back on deck the next day, having had a good rest. And again, if you see yourself as a strategic asset, you can't be tired and drained for the next day. You are the star performer. You are like an athlete. You need to be on the ball and on the game. You're going to make better decisions. You're going to be faster. You're going to be a better communicator. You're going to have more energy if you're doing things like on-camera work. So as the business leader, you yourself need to get to a point of being proactive. You also need to get your team to a point of being proactive so they're not constantly chasing their tail, putting out fires. So proactive is what is going to drive growth, whereas reactive is constantly trying to battle not getting back to square one all the time. So write down the top 3 things that you are wasting time on right now and stop doing them. Simple as that. Sometimes a way to save time, be it in your own life or in your business life, is to look at the end-to-end process and just review what start to finish, what happens with that particular thing. Sometimes I've seen processes where the end state or somewhere in the middle of the process, it says, sign in the purple book. Well, what's the purple book for? Why do people have to sign in it? Where does it live? It was basically a redundant step that had been created by someone at some point that wanted to see something. But sometimes processes are no longer viable because now there's new technologies that can bypass it altogether. Another way to look at things is there a bit of information at the back end of a process that if you had have asked that one question at the start of the process, that it would make the entire chain a lot easier. So having checklists of things that you need to achieve and compulsory data validation can help avoid mistakes. Another thing that can save a lot of time is just simple questions. When staff come up to you and say, how do I do this or how do I do that? Ask back, have you read the knowledge article? If there's no knowledge article, create one. If there's no FAQs database, create one. But if you're wasting time answering questions, and yes, it can be good to show someone, but if you show them once, like here's the FAQ database, now ask a question there first. If there's no answer, raise a ticket or raise a request for an answer and then come to me. But also come to me with a potential solution, or maybe they've drafted the answer to that question and say, what is the best course of action, A, B, or C? Now doing this yields compound returns because now every time another staff member has a question in that organization about that one thing, it answers the question. So not only for you, but for other managers. So if you're in a large organization and you have lots of layers of management, sub-management, supervisors, and you've got this employee that asks, how do I download a payslip? Well, you create that and you put it in the onboarding. And that way now the manager doesn't need to say, hey, it's here. Maybe you've got another article somewhere else that's easy to find. The employee has already seen the video, can find it in the knowledge base. They know that most questions have been asked there, so they're going to go there first. And now you save 5 minutes per employee every time they have a question. So if your company's onboarding 50 people a month, now you're saving 50 times 5 every month. So that way it's just going to reduce those friction points and the overall productivity gain is immense. So not only should you create a task list for yourself, you should also be creating a task list for your team. Some of these can be daily, weekly, monthly tasks. The weekly ones might be order stock on this day. The monthly one might be run this report and send it to that company or whatever it happens to be. But by doing that, you're now creating a delegatable sequence of events, and everybody who can see the task ideally can see a link to a knowledge article that answers how to do that task. So if the employee's got any questions, it's pretty much self-solving how they do that thing. And then if there's still any questions after that, well, there might be an exception or an anomaly that you can't predict. But 99 times out of 100, they know how to do that. They don't have to ask you. So you get back 10, 20, 30 hours a week, a month in just doing manager time, where you're explaining things that they can find for themselves. Another way to help you prioritize a task is to look at the offset cost or the opportunity cost. So is it going to cost you your time or is it going to cost you somebody else's time? So for an employee, you might think, all right, well, if their hourly rate is $30, $40, that's how much it's going to cost me. But then the opportunity cost might be for you, what's your billable rate? What could you do alternatively that would bring in more revenue or save another cost, larger cost somewhere else? The next key element about delegation, ask your team. It's not simply good enough to say something under your breath and hope that it's just going to magically happen through your team. You need to say in very clear terms, this is what we are doing. This is why. This is the mission, the goal, the outcome, and you have a certain framework within which you can get that task done. If you can't get the task done exactly how I have said that you should do it, as long as you don't break this rule or that rule, you have freedom of operation to go and do that task. That is a way to make sure that people can do things and be able to deal with problems along the way without having to come back to you for every tiny little thing. As you delegate the task, you need to be asking questions. Do you understand? Is there anything you're missing here? Do you have the resources that you need? Once they have confirmed to you that they've got everything that they need, they understand the task and they can go and do it by themselves, that you check on them. You go and ask them a week later, a day later, depending on how long the task take, how are you going with that? Do you have everything you need? Is there anything missing? Let me check your progress to see if you're on track. Because if someone goes and spends 100 hours building the wrong thing, and you could have stopped them at hour 3, 4, or 5 and said, actually, can you tweak it this way? You're going to save a whole bunch of rework. And at the end of the task, once it's fully completed, you should look at whatever it is, review it, and say, yes, this was very good, or you could have improved in this way or that way. And you do it in a nice way, but you give that feedback, because should they have to do that task again, the next time they're going to incorporate that feedback and do it even better. And remember that this is what you are doing to improve the system, not necessarily the person. So maybe the process that you go through to review that person could do with an update. Maybe you take photos so you can show the next person, this is what the end state should look like. Or maybe you identified a great process, so now you should create a video on how that process should go. So next time someone else can watch it or see the highlights, and maybe instead of reading 5 articles, can watch a video in 2 minutes and get a better understanding of how it should run. So start improving your processes now. Go and make a list of everything you do in your business. Do it throughout the day. Just write on a note, put it in the diary, take a snapshot of your calendar if you're using that effectively. The next thing you should be doing is communicating between the teams on who's doing what. We like to have a daily and a weekly stand-up. A short one, just going, I'm working on this today, I'm working on that today. I've got this problem, I've got that problem. And communicating between the team means that problems get solved faster. Someone might say, oh, I've got experience with that, or I've got a template, or I've done that one before, or don't forget to think about this. And ideally, you've got some form of managerial feedback. Maybe you've got a task system that shows you which tasks were completed or not completed. Maybe it's going to automatically create recurring tasks as and when they're due. For example, if you needed to go and do something every second Tuesday, now you know you can do that because the task is going to come up 3 days before it's actually required. Then you can start to see the average duration of how long tasks have been left outstanding, which tasks have been done, which ones have not been done, why have they not been done? Is it an unimportant one that would be a nice to have, or is it something that's critical? And you can perhaps have warning signs and lights and things to say, this task that's critical is overdue by 1 hour, get onto it. Things like that. So remember, after you master your own time, you need to help your team to master their time. And then once you've got that sorted, now your productivity is immensely increased. So that's it for this lesson. Thank you for watching. Make sure to watch the next lesson.